Hello and welcome back, and that is right, this video is about me discussing my favourite network upgrades. And I know what you're thinking, what kind of loser has favourite network upgrades? And yeah, you got me bang to rights, I am that loser. But with so much of the components that we use in NAS and general computer going up in price, lots of us are considering curbing our upgrades, considering downgrades, or a lot of us are thinking of going sideways. And network upgrades are a great way to make more out of your solutions, whether it is that you're trying to maximize the amount that you can get out of the SSDs inside your system, or just simply opening up the channels between a lot of your components from your network switches to your clients and your NAS in order to open things up and save a bit of time and therefore money. So in this video, there's going to be varying degrees of network connectivity, varying degrees of price, and ultimately by the end, hopefully you will find a network upgrade that best suits your needs. But a few disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, some of these are wild and unfortunately not compatible with everyone. So I will try my best to detail when a certain component is only compatible within certain network or certain hardware client setups. Also, some of the devices I'm going to talk about haven't even been released yet, but they're ones that I got to play with when I was in Shenzhen, China, the last couple of journeys, and I'll include them in the video, but do keep in mind and I'll highlight it when these are ones for Q2 2026. But for now, let's crack on with our selection. So first up, we're skipping 1 gig and 2.5 gig and going straight into 5 gigabit networking. This is from a brand known as Minisforum. One of the worst names I've ever heard. I will say this is a network adapter that one day turned up in a padded envelope at my office. Again, I should highlight none of the brands I'm talking about today have paid for this video. Some of them they've sent adapters to me for previous videos, but this is all my own words. These are my choices, and these are all genuine adapters that I have personally used either for an extended period of time or have got me out of a fix. But this just arrived. I don't know how they got my address. I assume it was from another brand. And the reason I picked this is twofold. Number one, if you've seen me do a review of a 2.5 gig or a 5 gig NAS with speed testing, I was using this adapter. It's a USB Type-C input going into a 5 gig copper NIC there on the rear, but crucially, this has an additional USB. This means for additional power delivery, some of the throttle that can happen with portable devices with 5 gig NICs is after 2.5 gig. Although the controllers from the likes of Realtek are actually quite similar for 2.5 and 5 gig, the power draw can actually be surprising. And a lot of USB to 5 gig adapters, when you connect into the USB of the connected device, yes, if you're using USB4 or if you're using Thunderbolt, you're fine. But a lot of users don't realize that the USB-C might not give quite the right oomph. And a few times when I've done 5 gig testing, when I've got I've got slightly erroneous results, it has been because of not enough power delivery. And when I've entered further power into this device, the results have been better. I've not found another 5 gig to USB adapter with clear PD separate input. Again, it can run off the standard 5 gig and has run fine off 5 gig USB before, but sometimes when a bit of extra pump has been needed, that has been beneficial. And given this knocks around for about 20 NICA here in the UK, again, a little bit higher in some places, 25 thereabouts, I find it very difficult to fault this, which has never let me down. Again, Minisforum, whoever you are, well done. Next up, we step into the world of 10 gig networking. USB4 and Thunderbolt to 10 gig network adapters are actually pretty bloody common. One of the earliest ones we talked about here on the channel was this, the Sonnet Solo, a Thunderbolt 3 to 10 gig copper port. Although it's still a great little adapter, it is showing its age. And a big part of that is to do with the transition from Thunderbolt 3 into Thunderbolt 4 and then Thunderbolt 5. And the band utilization in terms of the PCIe utilization and the number of lanes allocated, because at Thunderbolt 3 it was kind of fixed at 3x4. And notwithstanding the power utilization there and how often it can affect the overall client system, it wasn't until the likes of USB4 really opened up the PCIe gen and lane distribution flexibility that we saw great USB4 to 10 gig adapters. Now, there are loads of examples in the market, but the two I'm mainly going to talk about for a single 10 gig port are as follows. Number one, it's this. This is from UniFi. Again, they weren't new. They actually released their USB4 to 10 gig copper adapter later than most brands. But this thing runs crazy cool. Also, it's pretty affordable compared to some of the options in the market, and it's the one that's kind of become my default portable 10 gig USB4 network adapter. Again, it's smaller than a number of options in the market that have come out over time. It is half the size of that Sonnet one came out a few years before, and ultimately, if I was to recommend a USB4 to 10 gig standard cut-through bus powered adapter, the UniFi offering is the one that I generally recommend. Now, I said there'll be two options. The reason for that is the other option is currently going through review right now at the time of recording. In fact, the reason I don't have it on the table is it's sodding connected to that Mac. And that is from IOCrest or Liquor. Now, they are a brand, we visited their HQ in China a while ago, and they've released a USB 4 to 10 gig USB and SD card hub. Now, this thing is great. It is silent, it is fanless. You're seeing hopefully the images there on screen, and it has gone down an absolute treat during our testing. I saw it originally in China, and it is one of the cheapest network adapters for 10G I've seen in the market for a while. But it is the idea that it is a USB 4 going into 10 gig copper NIC and USB connectivity and dual SD card slot that really sets it apart. So yes, I'm continuing to recommend that UniFi adapter I just mentioned, but right now this thing is, colour me impressed. And for those that are looking for a hub with 10 gig, the options for USB 4 have generally all been from brands like OWC, Other World Computing, and their 10 gig USB 4 docking station is absurdly expensive. And this thing's sitting at around depending on where you shop around, $80 to $120 mark. For that amount of connectivity, this thing sends ripples and waves, and I can't wait to see where they go next, and stay tuned for the full review on that. And also, links to all of the adapters I've talked about are going to be linked in the description below. Now we're going to take a quick break from wired connections and talk a little bit now about wireless, because the connectivity, speed and reliability and stability of wireless connections has got better. There is still question marks about distance and at what point is it just easier to plug in a cable, or just people that want the simplicity and wire-free lifestyle that Wi-Fi can give when these two architectures can start living together in perfect harmony. But Wi-Fi 7, with a lot of benefits with regards to channel width and individual connections at 320 Hz, one of the things it brought to the table and made lots of noise about was MLO, multi-link operation, or multi-link output. Again, we can argue in the comments. Now, it was arguably pretty oversold, because right now, MLO in Wi-Fi 7 runs under something called multi-link single radio for the most part. That means although you've got multiple connections over the 6 GHz, 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz connection, it's more like load balancing where things are taken in turns. When what people really want from MLO is multi-link, multi-radio connectivity. And the problem is most client devices and most network adapters aren't engaging with this because of the heavier power draw, the concerns it has towards cooling as well. And it's a chicken and egg in a catch-22 where the clients and the network adapters and the router makers are waiting for someone else to make the move. The hardware is largely there, but it's the software feature set that isn't. Until now. And that's what brings us into this network adapter from UniFi, the Billy Big Bonks AirWire. This is real MLO, they say. This, connected via USB to your client PC or Mac device, allows you to enjoy real multi-link, multi-radio connectivity there. Now, Again, we've done our provisional video and the full review of this is still ongoing because we want to do extended testing and we're talking to ratings over in Canada as well. But right now, this is pretty much the only option out there. And although I'm talking about the best and my favorite adapters, we have to acknowledge this is kind of the only gig in town. Also, its compatibility outside of UniFi routers and UniFi AP is largely non-existent. So although I include it now more as a curiosity, we have to acknowledge that the age of true high-performance Wi-Fi is on its way, but it ain't cheap. And now we move on to dual 10 gigabit networking there. Now, dual 10G for the longest time was the remit of PCIe cards only, because at that point, PCIe cards were the only way that you can manage the cooling, manage the power delivery, but also manage the PCIe bandwidth, because it isn't just a question of aligning 10 gigabit of channel PCIe bandwidth per port. You actually have to give more than that. You have to generally assign at least 2 lanes of Gen 3, 1 lane of Gen 4, or 4 lanes of Gen 2 PCIe. You have to over-egg more than what it looks like for the 10 gig NIC, and that was why it was always the remit of PCIe. Now, after that, we started seeing USB4 and Thunderbolt to dual 10 gig adapters. Look at ATTO, they were insanely expensive, but USB4 has opened the floodgates to a lot more affordable options in the market that either allow you to use older controllers on this new USB to M.2 framework, or allow you to take advantage of newer generation controllers from Realtek, Aquantia, Asmedia, that kind of stuff. And I've got 2 options for you here. Now, one of them is super affordable. It's another one from Aoostar NAS, but there are a better one out there. This is if you're looking for a budget solution. This, taking advantage of an older generation Intel controller, I think it's the X710, I might be wrong, going into USB 4 there on the rear. This outputs into 2 SFP, so you still need your transceivers there to go inside, or at least the DAC cables, and of course fiber channel. This is pretty darn cheap, around $80 to $100 for a dual port 10 gig. Now, I still recommend this, I do, but they themselves are working on a better version than this. And on top of that, you've got this from QNAP. This has become my de facto 10 gig network adapter when I'm testing systems for both Windows and Mac. This, with USB 4, with a much newer controller inside, active cooling, and there on the side, 2 copper 10 gig connections there. This has been reliable AF. It has never left this desk. Chances are, some videos, you've sort of seen it in the background. If you've seen me test 10 gig, this is the thing in the background that I've been desperately trying to cover during thermal testing as it gets hotter. This is what I currently recommend for those looking external dual port 10 gig connectivity there. Finally, we've got to talk about 25 gig networking. Again, I'm not going to talk about 50 or 100 gig, because I swear at that point we are talking enterprise in this video. They're not going to cut corners. But 25 gig has become more affordable. Now, this is my old Melonex dual port 25 gig card. This is what I used between 2 servers for the longest time, using QSFP. Again, when you get to 25 gig, you generally find that they are always dual port, largely because notwithstanding enterprise and failover, but also once you factored in the controller and the PCIe allocation, adding a second port there just becomes easier rather than trying to differentiate it into single and dual port. The same goes, by the way, to 50 and 100 gig cards. But this card has not been used for the longest time. Now, why is that? It's because 25 gig adapters have become a great deal more affordable and better, more efficient controllers out there. Now, we do have to give another shout out again to Aoostar or Liquo. That is because they are working on a USB 4 to dual port 10 gig card. The thing is, I can't recommend it in this video. I can't. Not yet, anyway. Largely because I don't have one. I went to China, I went to their HQ, I took one apart, I saw what was inside, they showed me development figures, they showed me all of the information. I think it will deliver. I think it will deliver the same as the other ones. It's using a newer controller as well. I like it, but unfortunately I don't have one in the studio yet. I think I'm going to have one in May, and I'm going to do a review on that, and hopefully it lives up to it. But I wanted to include it in this video because you might be watching this in the future. I'll also say their developed 25 gig network adapter has an on-off switch. You will be amazed how many of the adapters do not have on-off switches. And I know that sounds silly, but trust me, when you are running a docking station with multiple screens and network adapters going into a NAS, and then you take your cheeky little MacBook away to work in a coffee shop or overseas in China, and then you come back, want to put the device down, open up your MacBook and connect it. When you do that, sometimes you don't want your big, beefy, power-hungry network adapter to suddenly draw all of the oomph. Having an on-off switch means that I can still dock this into my Mac, but not have to have it action straight away. But again, this video, I'm not recommending this directly, simply because it's not available yet. But I'll tell you what I can recommend, the bigger boy of this. Remember that dual-port QNAP that I mentioned earlier on? This is that dual port 10 gig, but I've also utilized and seen high-end performance of the 25 gig version of this at multiple trade shows and at QNAP's own HQ. The 25 gig version of this is banger and uses the same development and architecture as the 10 gig, but beefed up significantly. So if you are looking for a USB4 10 gig at the time of recording, at the time of publication of this video, for USB 4 to dual port 25 gig, theirs is the best adapter I've seen yet via USB. But, what's that noise? Is that the sound of PCIe banging on the door saying, what about us? We gotta talk about this. This is almost the entire reason this video sodding exists. Earlier this year, I reviewed the new Minisforum MS02 Ultra, their new mini PC, and inside was a specialized PCIe card. It was a 2x Gen 4 M.2 NVMe card with two 25 gig network ports on the rear there. Now that card, beautiful. And I asked the brand, this card, where did you get it from? Who is it from? And they said in-house development, and they were going to sell it on its own. And that is what this is. I've not even opened this yet, largely because I took the card out of that Minisforum and used it elsewhere. Now, driver and lane support and having the right byte verification is going to be paramount, hence why recommending PCIe network cards can be tricky, but knowing that you can now get this card on its own, again with two full-length 22110 M.2 NVMe slots and dual port 25 gig, that is Billy Big Box. Again, bifurcation, support, drivers and more, these may be barriers, and obviously this card will almost certainly work better in a Minisforum system, particularly that Ultra, but there's going to be people that will get this working outside of that, and chances are you probably can. If they're going to sell it independently, it wouldn't surprise me if there are ways and means. It is a times 16, keep that in mind, and almost certainly you're going to get the most out of it out of a Gen 5 slot rather than a Gen 4, but this is what I'm talking about. This, if it was a USB 4 adapter, it would be take my money. But this has been my favorite network adapters. I know there's been a lot of USB 4 and USB-C connectivity, but things are getting smaller with those micro PCs and PCIe cards now, whether it is you want to use an external docking station, of which I've reviewed quite a lot, or simply that you want to run that more compact system and are looking for those mini upgrades to make the most of newer technology. Adapters like the ones I've spoken about today open the floodgates and mean that whether it is you're looking for more modest connections, wireless connections, or true scalability that you can feel the benefits of in the future for years to come, these are great network upgrades that you can consider. Again, No brand has paid for this video. Some of these have been provided by brands. Some of them I've purchased. They've got no control over this. These are my words, my recommendations, either based on my own hands-on experience or day-to-day utilization. They're all linked below at different stores. So if you have enjoyed this video, you do want to support what we do, and you are going to buy them anyway from those stores, make sure those three things are true. Use the links in the description, because we get a small commission. It's just me and Eddie doing this gig here at NAS Compares, and YouTube is getting harder. They're mucking around with the UX. They're mucking around with the return on commissions when it comes to ad revenue, and we've got to keep the lights on. And this is the way we do it, with the least frictional way possible, where you don't have to put your hands in your pocket any more than you might have to buy things these days. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.